90 miles. That is the distance between the United States and the island of Cuba. 90 miles, less than the distance from London to Birmingham. On a clear morning, you can stand at the southernmost tip of the United States, look out across the water, and almost see it. And yet Cuba is one of the most sealed, most deliberately preserved, most isolated societies on Earth. The most powerful nation in the history of the Western Hemisphere has spent over 60 years trying to bring this island to its knees through embargoes, through covert operations that read more like fiction than foreign policy. Cuba is still here. I first arrived in Havana to the smell of exhaust from a car built before my parents was born, to the sound of a trumpet from a window 3 stories above the street, to the sight of laundry strung between balconies on buildings so old, so worn down to their bones by salt air and time, that they seemed to have decided the world had moved on without them, and were entirely at peace with that. This is not a story of beaches or cocktails or picturesque decay. This is the story of 11 million people who looked at everything the world threw at them and refused. And later in this story, I will tell you about a legal contract, a binding financial agreement whose payments Cuba has refused to accept for over 60 years, because accepting them would mean admitting something they will never admit. This is Cuba, and it begins with a choice. The choice was made on the first day of January, 1959. A bearded revolutionary named Fidel Castro rode into Havana, the crowd 30 deep on every street corner, and the government that had served American business interests for decades collapsed overnight. The casinos closed. The American companies that owned the land, the sugar, the telephone lines, they were nationalized, and Washington, 90 miles away, began to calculate its response. What followed was one of the most sustained, most documented, and most consistently unsuccessful campaigns of political pressure in modern history. The United States imposed a comprehensive trade embargo in 1962, cutting Cuba off from American goods, medicine, fuel, and spare parts. It expected Cuba to collapse within months. Cuba did not collapse. The CIA attempted to accelerate matters through operations that, when the classified files were eventually released, read like the plots of a particularly imaginative spy novel. There was a plot involving an exploding cigar designed to detonate during a speech. There was a plan involving a diving wetsuit treated with a fungal skin disease. There was a scheme using a chemical that would make Castro's beard fall out, destroying his authority. Every plot failed. Every operation was abandoned, botched, or simply did not work. Fidel Castro died on the 25th of November, 2016, in his bed, at the age of 90. The embargo, meanwhile, endures, and on the streets of Havana, the consequences of 60 years of that embargo are visible in a way unlike anything else on Earth. Approximately 60,000 pre-revolution American cars still run in Cuba today. Chevrolets, Buicks, Pontiacs, Cadillacs, the full chrome glory of 1950s America, preserved in Caribbean heat as if someone pressed pause on the world in 1958 and never let go. But what the photographs never tell you, what no tourist brochure mentions, is what lives beneath the bodywork. When the embargo ended, the supply of American engine parts Cuban mechanics did something that had no template anywhere. They adapted. They sourced Soviet Lada engines and fitted them into American frames. They installed Chinese diesel motors beneath Cadillac bonnets. They fabricated replacement parts from whatever metal could be found, welded by hand in workshops with tools that had no business still functioning. The outside of these cars is 1955. The inside is whatever worked. I stood on a corner in central Havana and watched one pass, a 1957 Pontiac, candy red, engine rumbling with a sound that was not remotely American, and understood, in a way I had not fully before, what 60 years of a closed economy actually produces. Not collapse, not surrender, ingenuity, forced, extraordinary, world-class ingenuity. The mechanics who mastered this passed their knowledge to their sons, who passed it to theirs. There are no manuals. There is only the knowledge that lives in a family's hands, accumulated across generations of solving the unsolvable. The 60,000 cars are not a tourist attraction. They are a philosophy. And that philosophy has a name, though you will not find it in any car manual or political handbook. You will find it on every street corner, in every home, in every conversation in this country. In the one phrase that has defined Cuban daily life for 60 years. No es fácil. It is not easy. But here, it never has been. No es fácil is not a complaint. That is the first thing you learn when you spend time in Cuba. It is not resignation. It is not despair. It is something with no precise equivalent in English, an acknowledgement of difficulty delivered with a shrug and a smile, a philosophical acceptance that the path between where you are and where you need to be will require more than a straightforward plan. The Cubans call it resolver. To resolve. Tengo que resolver. I have to figure it out. Not I will buy a solution. Not I will call someone to fix it. I will find a way, through whatever combination of creativity, connection, patience, and stubborn refusal to give up that the situation demands. Resolver is the reason a Cuban mechanic can rebuild a 1955 engine with parts from 3 different countries and 2 different decades. It is the reason the lights go out in an apartment building and 3 neighbors appear in the stairwell within minutes, one with tools, one with candles, one with a story that makes everyone laugh until the power comes back. It is a culture that has turned constraint into a form of arty. And at the center of that culture is an institution most outsiders know only by its more alarming description. The CDR, the Comité de Defensa de la Revolución, was established in 1960 as a neighborhood surveillance system. Every block in Cuba has one. Their original mandate was clear: to watch for counter-revolutionary activity, to report dissent, to be the eyes of the government at the level of the street. This is true, and it is not the whole story, because the same CDR that can report on your political views also coordinated the vaccination of your children. It organized blood drives when the hospital ran low. It checked on the elderly woman at the end of the street after the hurricane and distributed emergency supplies when the water stopped running for a week. The surveillance and the care exist inside the same structure, the same committee, often administered by the same person. Think about the last time a system failed you: a power cut, a broken machine, a wall of bureaucracy that made no sense at all. Now imagine that feeling is every single day, and that your entire culture evolved specifically around that challenge, not as suffering, but as art. The Malecón is where that art breathes freely. 7 kilometers of seawall curving along the northern edge of Havana, battered by the Atlantic on one side and lined by the crumbling grandeur of colonial buildings on the other. In the evenings, it becomes something no architect ever designed: the city's living room. Fishermen cast lines into the spray. Old men argue about baseball with the passion of people who consider it a form of religion. Young couples sit watching the sun dissolve into the water. Musicians appear from nowhere, play for no one, and somehow attract everyone. No stage, just Havana, resolving itself into another evening. But if you truly want to understand what Resolver looks like in practice, what it tastes like, what it produces when an entire nation is forced to reinvent how it feeds itself, you need to step away from the sea wall and go inside a Cuban kitchen. Inside a Cuban kitchen, a single dish tells you everything. It is called Moros y Cristianos, Moors and Christians. It is black beans, ladled over white rice, cooked in sofrito, a fragrant base of onion, garlic, and green pepper, and served at almost every table, at almost every meal, in almost every home on this island. And the name of this ordinary dish contains the entire colonial history of the Caribbean inside it. The Moors, the Muslim civilization of North Africa and the Iberian Peninsula, defeated in the Spanish Reconquista in 1492. The same year, Columbus arrived in the Americas. The Christians, the Spanish colonial power that followed. The black beans and the white rice, the conquered and the conqueror, served on the same plate, eaten together without comment every single day for 500 years. A meal that is also a history lesson, one that requires no textbook. But to understand Cuban food fully, you must first understand what happens when the food runs out. In 1991, the Soviet Union collapsed, and for Cuba, that collapse was not a distant geopolitical event. It was immediate, physical, and total. The Soviet Union had been supplying Cuba with fuel, food, medicine, and machinery, roughly 80% of the island's imports. Within a single year, that supply was simply gone. Cubans called it the Periodo Especial, the special period. Factories stopped because there was no fuel to run them. Buses stopped because there was no petrol. Food distribution collapsed because there were no working vehicles to move it. A study published in the British Medical Journal found that Cubans lost an average of 5 to 6 kilograms during this period. People ate grapefruit skin, sugar dissolved in water, whatever could be found and made edible. The tourist restaurants 2 kilometers away still served lobster and mojitos, a version of Cuba entirely disconnected from the one that existed beyond the hotel doors. And then, out of that hunger, something extraordinary happened. When the government could no longer supply food to the cities, Cuban families began to grow it themselves, on rooftops, in car parks, in vacant lots and traffic medians, and every patch of urban earth that could be turned and planted. This network of organic farms, the organoponicos, spread across Havana and every major Cuban city, like a city quietly teaching itself to survive. by the time international researchers arrived to study them, Cuba had developed one of the most sophisticated urban organic agricultural systems in the world, built entirely out of necessity and entirely without outside support. Development economists and environmental scientists now travel here specifically to study the organoponicos. The very crisis designed to break the island had produced something the rest of the world had been trying to engineer for decades. I sat in the kitchen of an elderly woman in the Vedado neighborhood of Havana who had lived through the special period. She still keeps a small pot of herbs on her windowsill. Not because she needs to, but because she has never been fully able to stop. She made me a plate of moros y cristianos. We ate it without speaking. And I thought about the names of things, how much history a language can carry inside the simplest description of the simplest meal, and how little of any of it ever shows on the plate. But the Cuban identity I needed to understand was not forged only in kitchens. It was also forged in a room full of tobacco and something far more dangerous than smoke. But there is something else about this island that has stayed with me. Something legal, something financial, something that has been quietly building in a drawer for over 60 years. To understand it, you need to go back to 1903. That was the year the United States signed a lease agreement with the newly independent Cuban government for a piece of land on the island's southeastern coast, a natural harbor called Guantanamo Bay. The annual payment was set at approximately $4,000. In exchange, the United States received the right to maintain a naval base there indefinitely. The base has been there ever since. Today, it is known to the world primarily as a detention facility. But to Cuba, it is something else entirely. It is an illegal occupation of sovereign territory, and the proof of that position, the physical, paper, legal record of it, is contained in a drawer somewhere in the Cuban government's offices. Because since January of 1959, Cuba has refused to cash a single American check. Every annual payment has arrived. Every payment has been set aside. 60 years of American checks, signed, sealed, legally tendered, sitting uncashed, because cashing them would mean acknowledging that the lease is valid. Cuba will not do that. The checks sit in that drawer like a quiet argument that has been making its point to no one in particular for 60 years. There is something about that drawer, about the discipline it represents, the patience it embodies, the decades it contains, that tells you more about the Cuban political character than any speech or slogan ever could. But the drawer is not the only thing Cuba has been quietly maintaining while the world looked elsewhere. Since the 1960s, Cuba has sent hundreds of thousands of medical professionals, doctors, nurses, surgeons, and specialists to over 160 countries across Africa, Latin America, and Asia. They have treated tens of millions of patients who had no other access to care. After the earthquake in Haiti in 2010, Cuban medical teams were among the first on the ground and the last to leave. Cuban doctors have delivered children, performed surgeries, and treated diseases in communities that the rest of the world's health systems had simply never reached. Cuba, under a 60-year embargo, with an economy a fraction of its neighbors, has a doctor-to-patient ratio significantly higher than that of the United States. A nation that cannot reliably import spare parts for its cars has become one of the world's most prolific exporters of medical expertise. I spoke to a Cuban doctor in Havana who had spent 3 years on a medical mission in southern Africa. He returned to Cuba to a monthly government salary of approximately $40. I asked him if it had been worth it. He looked at me the way Cubans sometimes look at foreigners who ask questions like that, as if the answer was so obvious it barely deserved the energy of a response. But before we can fully understand what drives that kind of commitment, that particular mixture of pride and sacrifice and defiant belonging, we need to finally enter that room full of tobacco and meet the man who read a revolution into existence, one page at a time. The room smells of cured tobacco and old wood and something harder to name, a kind of accumulated human presence, the residue of 100 years of concentrated work. This is a Cuban cigar factory, and it looks at first exactly as you might expect. Long rows of workers at wooden benches, each one rolling leaves with a practiced efficiency that makes the process seem effortless, which it is not. But there is something missing from this room, something that was here once, whose absence you can feel without quite being able to explain: the platform. In the decades before and after Cuban independence, cigar factories contained a raised wooden platform in the center of the factory floor. On that platform sat a person called a lector, a reader. While the workers rolled tobacco, the lector read to them aloud for hours. Not instructions, not management announcements, novels, newspapers, political philosophy, Victor Hugo, Alexandre Dumas, the writings of José Martí, and, as the decades passed, the works of Karl Marx. The workers voted each week on what the lector would read next. The choice was theirs. Factory owners watched with increasing alarm, because the workers who gathered around that platform were the same workers forming unions, organizing strikes, and appearing at political meetings that had nothing to do with cigars. The lectors were eventually banned. Wherever Cuban cigar workers gathered, and a lector had found a platform, in Cuba, in Tampa, in Key West, the practice was suppressed, declared a threat to order. The owners understood too late what the workers had always known. The most dangerous thing you can give a person is not a weapon, it is a story. This is the oldest lesson in Cuban history. And it is not only found in cigar factories, it is found in every Catholic church on this island. The Afro-Cuban religion known as Santeria survived 3 centuries of colonial suppression through a strategy of extraordinary ingenuity, the same strategy used in reverse. Enslaved Africans from the Yoruba people of West Africa were forbidden from practicing their religion, so they matched their gods to Catholic saints. Chango, the Yoruba god of thunder and lightning, became Saint Barbara. Yemaya, goddess of the sea and motherhood, became Our Lady of Regla. Ochun, goddess of love and rivers, became Our Lady of Charity, the patron saint of Cuba herself. The African gods wore Catholic faces, and they survived. The lectors hid revolution inside the act of reading. The Yoruba priests hid their gods inside the language of the colonizers' faith. Both used the same method: hide what you love inside what they allow. Survive by wearing the face of what threatens you. Santeria is not a relic of the past. It is practiced today by millions of Cubans, openly, defiantly, without apology, by people whose ancestors preserved it, one disguised saint at a time. The same island that keeps its uncashed checks in a drawer also keeps its gods behind a Christian face. Both require the same thing: patience and the absolute refusal to forget. But the generation now inheriting all of this, the lectors and the orishas, the uncashed checks, the organoponicos, the cars with Soviet engines, is holding something their parents never had: a phone and a world on the other side of the screen. On the 3rd of December 2018, Cuba did something that most of the rest of the world had done years earlier. It turned on mobile internet. Not slowly, not partially. Overnight, 11 million Cubans with smartphones went from having almost no internet access to having the world in their pocket. Before that date, internet access existed only through government-issued Wi-Fi cards, used at designated public parks and hotel lobbies. You would see Cubans gathering in small groups on park benches late at night. Not for conversation, but for connection, holding their phones up toward the signal like a congregation reaching for light. That changed in December 2018, and almost nothing has been the same since. The generation that grew up without it is now navigating between two Cubas, the one their grandparents built and the one their phones show them every morning. They are managing paladares, private home restaurants, that began as quiet acts of economic defiance in the 1990s, when the special period forced the government to allow small private enterprise. What started as a table in someone's living room has become, in many cases, a full restaurant, a business, a source of independence. They are cuentapropistas, the self-employed class, whose legal existence expanded through economic reforms over the last decade. Running barbershops, art studios, tour companies, small design firms. Building businesses on unreliable internet connections, in apartments without guaranteed electricity, in a currency system that has shifted beneath them more than once. They are creating specifically and stubbornly inside every constraint they were born into. I sat with a young woman in Vedado, 26 years old, running a private art gallery from the ground floor of her family home, who told me she had considered leaving 3 times: New York, Madrid, Miami. Each time, she had stayed, not because she had no options, because she was not finished here. If you were 23 years old, and you could see the entire world on your phone, but could barely afford to leave your street, what would you choose? Stay and build something from almost nothing, in a place that demands everything and offers no guarantees, or leave and carry a place you love in your chest for the rest of your life, always half somewhere else, never quite fully anywhere? The young Cubans I spent time with did not answer this question simply, because it is not a simple question. They are the children of people who made sacrifices they did not ask for, inheriting a revolution they did not choose, living inside an argument with history that started 60 years before they were born. And yet, when I asked that young woman in Vedado what she was building, she looked at the gallery walls around her, the paintings made by her neighbors, the handmade frames, the repurposed exhibition space, and said something I have not been able to stop thinking about since. She said, "We are not preserving the past. We are deciding what it was for." So what does Cuba preserve? Not the 50s, not the revolution, not the ideology. What it preserves is something older and harder to name. The conviction that where you come from is worth the cost of staying. The stubborn, irrational belief that belonging to a place is not just something that happens to you. It is something you choose against everything. The young woman in Vedado was right. This is not about preservation. It is about decision. Every generation of Cubans has had to decide in their own way what this island was worth, and every generation, one way or another, has given the same answer. More than this. Worth more than what is being offered, and worth more than what is being threatened. I stood on the Malecón on my last evening in Havana. An old man played trumpet at the water's edge for no one but himself. A 1955 Buick passed behind him, Soviet engine running in American chrome, unhurried. And 20 meters away, a young woman sat on the seawall with her phone, watching the same water that separates this island from the country that has spent 60 years trying to change what she is. She was not looking at Florida. She was watching the light go down on a city she had chosen not to leave. 3 Cubas, 6 feet of seawall, 1 evening. This was only one story from one island. Subscribe, and next week I will take you somewhere that will leave you just as speechless.